Welcome into the Autzen Audibles podcast. I'm Prehm and Erik Skopil on the show. As always, it's Thursday, which means, hey, it's almost game day. We're going to preview Oregon's latest game, week 2, against a Power 4 school, not a Group 5 school anymore. Oregon's playing Oklahoma State out of the Big 12. They're moving past their week 1 game against an FCS opponent. In Montana State, they're 1-0 on the year. Oklahoma State, they played UT Martin last weekend. They won that game as well, 27-7, but came at a cost. Their starting quarterback went down with an injury, so they're having to go into this Oregon game with a backup quarterback. And it's, strangely enough, 2 weeks in a row for Oregon where they'll be playing an OSU team. Oklahoma State from the Big 12, and then Oregon State next week, or I should say 2 weeks at home, out of the Group of 5. But nonetheless, here we go, Eric. Oklahoma State comes to town. Only the second meeting between these two teams. That kind of surprises me a little bit that these two teams have only played once. 2008, it was a great game. Oregon won it. It was Mike Bellotti's last game coaching the Oregon Duck football program as the head coach. He then transitioned into the AD and then retired shortly after that. Gundy was on staff. He was the head coach. It was like year 3, I think, for Mike Gundy. Year 4 for Mike Gundy. They went 9-4 that season. He has been a staple in college football. His 21st year coaching at Oklahoma State as head coach. Before that, he served as position coaches at Oklahoma State before that. So this is a guy that he played at Oklahoma State, served as a quarterback, moved on to receivers coach, quarterbacks coach, offensive coordinator, left to go coach at Baylor in Maryland for about 4 seasons, and then came back early 2000 to be their assistant head coach and offensive coordinator, and then was elevated in 2005. But they're consistently ranked in the top 25. They're consistently a program that wins 8 to 10 games a year under Mike Gundy. But last season was one of the rare dips, their first losing season under Mike Gundy since year 1 of 2005, when they went 3-9. Drastically different opponents or rosters from last year's team. Like we were talking about this in the previous show. Like their portal class numbers is absolutely bonkers.
41 guys. Yeah,
that's a lot. So, like on paper and historically, this feels like, hey, this should have been a potential maybe game day possibility. It's not. They're actually going to be in the state of Oklahoma for Michigan, Oklahoma. But when you hear Oregon, Oklahoma State schedule a non-conference regular season game, you instantly think that should be one of the better games of that week's slate. And Oregon's a 28.5-point favorite. Weird, strange dynamics, but I still think we can learn a lot about this team.
Yeah, and before we jump too far, man, I just want to say welcome back, YouTube crowd. We're on camera. I'm in my silly Bono glasses here for the concussion. Great to be back.
I can go to a concert after this.
Thanks, Matt. I'm sure I will not get any comments about these silly. They're called Theraspecs, and they work great for concussions. So I'm avoiding all the natural light that would otherwise be bothering my eyes and my brain. So fun to be back. I just want to get that out of the way real quick. This is such a weird deal because when this game was set up several years ago, I think we thought this was going to be potentially a pretty marquee game because, like you say, Matt, like Oklahoma State has, I think, only won one Big 12 championship, I think, which is under Mike Gundy, which is sort of surprising because he's been extremely consistently successful. Like you said, like 8, 9, 10 win teams basically every year up until last year. But then last year happened, and then they lost a ton of players from a year ago, which is probably a good thing. They cleared house from a coaching perspective. This is, by the way, the back-to-back weeks that Oregon was playing a team with brand new offensive and defensive coordinators. That's going to be interesting. Kind of a lot of newness for this Oklahoma State team. Like probably for a team that didn't make a head coaching change, like this has got to be as much staff and personnel changes like I've ever seen for a team that didn't have a head coaching change, right? Like 41 players are transfers. They also signed like over a dozen high school players. They like I said, they've got an entirely different assistant coaching staff, and so here we are. And I find them to be a kind of a hard team to place in terms of how good they're going to be. I think if you look at like the team talent composite, they're 49th, and that feels probably about right. And like you said, Matt, it's kind of a weird deal where, like, as I was kind of saying earlier, when this game was initially announced, you're thinking this could be a couple of ranked teams and maybe a favorite in the Big 12 and a favorite in what was the Pac-12 at the time, I think, when this game was announced, obviously now the Big 10. And yet you look up at Oklahoma State, they're not picked anywhere near the top of their conference this year. They're picked right at the bottom in several of the polls. And it's a team that Oregon is favored to beat by 4 scores, which I think we even said on our mailbag show, that felt a little bit lofty, but kind of the more you dive into it, you can kind of see the case for it. And we'll get into some of the matchups here in a moment. I think the fact that Oklahoma State's breaking in a new quarterback after losing Haas Hesney in the opener, which is tough. Your starting quarterback goes down in the first quarter of the first game, and he's probably going to miss at least a month of the season with a broken foot. It kind of makes sense why there's such a large margin. But I'm with you that like this felt like it was a game that was probably going to be a couple of the top teams in their conferences, and maybe it'll prove that way. Ultimately, maybe Oklahoma State will surprise some people this year, but that doesn't feel like where it's at. And I guess to nip this in the butt, since we haven't addressed in the podcast, there's a little bit more juice around this game because these coaches had a couple of things to say about each other. Maybe not about each other, but certainly about some NIL discussion points, which were kind of made national news.
Yeah, Gundy on Monday threw out multiple times. They spend a lot of money talking about Oregon to get players. They've got a high payroll. He floated out the number of $40 million and then said, it might be off by $1 million here or there. And it was definitely you and I have talked about this a couple times. Why he even brought it up doesn't make a ton of sense, because even if he was trying to be genuine and being like he said today, he actually went on the radio, national radio, I think with Sirius XM, with Rick Neuheisel, and this morning, as of this recording, and tried to say, hey, this was taken out of context. I was trying to praise Oregon. I was trying to show our administration what we can do. Even if that was the intent, you're opening the door for what has transpired all week of you coming across like you're complaining, you're whining about an unfair advantage, which we should mind you, like they had a $1 billion super booster in Boone Pickens who donated millions, hundreds of millions of dollars to Oklahoma State. It was never a problem then. How many times did Gundy kind of strong arm Oklahoma State for more money for his end, for contract extensions and all of that during the last 7, 8, 10 years? And as Dan Lanning put it, like I thought Dan answered it pretty well. Kind of, hey, we respect what he's done. We're not going to dive too much into the weeds here, but you knew he had an answer teed up, and it was essentially, we're blessed to be at Oregon where we've got the resources to compete at a high level. And he acknowledged, like, hey, if you want to play at the highest level, you've got to invest. And that $40 million number is ludicrous. Oregon's not spending that much. They're not even close to $40 million. But he also pointed out, like, and one of the many things that Gundy talked about was, hey, they played UT Martin last week. And UT Martin and Oklahoma State are probably in wide spectrums of how much money they're spending on players in favor of Oklahoma State. Didn't have a problem then, but now when they're on the other end of it, it becomes a problem. I'm curious. We don't need to go back and forth about what was said with Gundy and Lanning, but more so the fallout that we're going to see on Saturday. You just gave maybe like the ultimate motivator in college football, free ammunition to be motivated. And we saw what happened when Colorado did all their stuff the Friday night when they did their walkthrough, and then how they were handling pregame and how Lanning went into the locker room and fired up, and the message that the team sent with their play. Lanning's had all week to just hammer home now. Hey, you're bought. You're not built. You're not going to be ready to go because you're only here because of money. And I think this Oregon team, while they were already probably going to do this, show up firing on all cylinders, I kind of think Oregon's going to play like their hair's on fire on Saturday just to prove a point to that how good they really are. It's not just money.
Just, I guess the only reaction I'll have is I just think in general, this is not just even in college athletics, but like, just don't talk about other people's salary or like what other people are making. I just think that's a dangerous territory to get into. That like you said, I know Gundy's kind of walked it back. Was like, no, I was trying to be, and that was actually what I felt when I listened to his press conference, which he mentioned Oregon has a lot of resources. I was like, it seems like he's just trying to say, I'm almost admiring the resources they have. They have that advantage. And then that kind of late that he did a radio show, which is where some of the comments got a little bit more direct, where he's talking about how much they're making and talking about how it's going to be difficult to keep Dante Moore and how maybe teams that are so far apart in NIL shouldn't be playing each other. And that's where it kind of got to a point where I think people were able to read more into it than it should be. But this is a self-inflicted wound. This is ultimately what it was. And he made it about Oregon. And again, to your point, like Dan made it about what a blessing it is to be in this situation, right? And like, I think if talk to just about anybody out there, I don't think many people are taking Mike's side on this one outside of Stillwater. So, and then I guess, we'll see. Like, the Ducks versus them next week is going to be interesting. I think the most popular Ducks versus them probably of all time is that Colorado game because of all the antics they caught on camera and all that stuff. Will we see Dan? How far is Dan going to lean into this? I guess. How far does he think? How far does he think he needs to lean into this? Is the other question. I'm fascinated by that part. I'm fascinated by like also what does this look like on Saturday? Because frankly, they were 28-point favorites before these comments were made. I think we all thought going in, Oregon was going to be able to win pretty comfortably just on paper. Do we see them take it up a level? Like I took that into consideration when I was making my predictions, which we'll get to at the end of the show here. Of like, do I add another touchdown? Do I add more points? Like, does that feel like the right approach? And like ultimately, I think I'm leaning that way. Of like, let's just expect that Oregon's going to put the foot down maybe a little bit more than they would have either way. Even in a game where I think again everybody anticipates it'll be heavy favor Oregon. So let's get into some of the matchups here, I guess. But that is just kind of it's a much different week than I thought. And like I was talking about with McLean Baxley from the Oklahoma State site a couple of days ago on the pod, like there kind of weren't a lot of storylines coming into this one, to be honest.
Now there are.
And now we've got them, which is, hey, like from our perspective, I guess that's a good thing. But like, I guess if you're Mike Gundy in Oklahoma State, you're probably thinking, gosh, I wish there wasn't this storyline out there.
Let's transition over to Oklahoma State's offense. Haas Henne is out. He started the game in the season opener and was injured, I believe, in the second quarter. He was a transfer from TCU. He's going to miss multiple weeks due to a lower leg injury, I believe. Top end speed was supposed to be kind of their new trigger man, a guy that was going to kind of restart the offense. He's out now. Zane Flores, a redshirt freshman, he is expected to start. He's replaced Henne in their week one win over UT Martin. He redshirted during the 2023 season and then received a medical hardship waiver for 2024 after dealing with an injury all season. So he's a redshirt freshman, but this is his third year in the system. Gundy's talked about how, he doesn't think the atmosphere at Autzen is going to really impact him all that often because he's gone to a couple of different places in the Big 12 last two seasons on the travel roster. And Gundy did say, like, well, he wasn't playing in those games, so that will factor into it. He's not going to be.
You think?
Yeah. He said Gundy's like he hasn't played, so that will probably play a factor a little bit. But being on the sideline in loud stadiums isn't going to be new to him. He's been there before. But this is going to be a guy that quite honestly, when Haas Henne went down, and they were rolling. I think they scored 3 straight scores their first 3 possessions of the game. They only finished the game with 27 points against a UT Martin team. And look, we know injuries early in the year to the quarterback position. Look at Wisconsin the last 2 seasons. Maybe a poor example because their offense has been inept forever, but they lose their starting quarterback both weeks, last year and this year, and that game is just ugly. And that's going to be the case for Oklahoma State. How quickly can Zane Flores adapt, and how quickly can he get up to speed for what Oklahoma State's offense was supposed to be is going to be a question. And quite honestly, if you're Oregon and you're on the defense side of the football, I really think they're foaming at the mouth because this feels like maybe like a wounded animal here, and you've got an opportunity as a predator to just finish the deal quickly.
Yeah, I guess a couple things on their offense. They've got some speed on the outside, and this has been one of the through lines this week from Dan and even talking like Aaron Flowers and some of the defensive players. Is the expectation is they're gonna air it out. They're gonna try to throw the ball downfield, and that's what you do, frankly, when like you're probably overmatched and you're going, we're not going to have the ability to string together 10 to 12 play drives very much and have sustained success. Let's just try to hit them in the mouth a couple of times with some deep shots. And so I expect this to be a game where they'll take their fair number of them. Terrell Davis had 2 catches for 75 yards in the opener. That kind of speaks to that big play potential. He was a D2 transfer from Central Oklahoma. They're like the most productive receiver in all of NCAA football last year. Had like 100 catches, 1,600 yards, 15 touchdowns or something like that. Really, really productive a year ago for at a lower level, and was pretty impactful in their opener. That speed on the outside is going to be what they have to lean on, I think, because you look at the run game, and this was probably the most, I would say, confounding part of it for me looking at it is after Hedgeny left the game, they just didn't have any run success. Like he was their best yards per carry rusher with 4 carries for 27 yards. And, this does take out a component because as Matt said, like, he's a significantly better runner than Flores. He's not quite Luke Moga, but I think he's run on sub 11 in the 100 meters as a high school kid, Hedgeny had. And so that's a guy who could really make some things happen with your legs. Well, you take that component out, and now you have to focus on a more traditional run game. You kind of take out that misdirection element, and they frankly just didn't run the ball well enough. Their 2 leading backs in the first game had 30 carries for a combined 88 yards. Like that's less than 3 yards a pop against an FCS opponent. That's not going to cut it. And so, I think for Oklahoma State, it's like, how much does that put on the shoulders of a quarterback who, again, is making his first start since high school? And he's had 3 years since high school. I mean, this is a guy who just hasn't played very much. This is the case for, Oregon probably should win this game and could win this game quickly, because do you get the young quarterback jitters? Like, I know Mike's saying he's not concerned about the young quarterback in a hostile environment, but how many times over the years have we heard, whether it be like Matt Barkley a long time ago, say something like that? Yeah. Or I remember, this is a weird random example, but like Fernando Mendoza at Cal had some comments about that.
Yeah, he said something about Autzen. That was weird.
Autzen was also, I think the rain, but it was like, this is again, young quarterbacks coming in here, not really respecting or not really understanding what the environment's going to be like. Not that Zane has said anything, but Mike has kind of set him up that way. I think that could be kind of a tough spot for them. And so, like, genuinely, like, their run game has to take a massive step forward against an Oregon run defense that gave barely an inch against a Montana State rush offense, which was expected to be the strength of that team. I think, the case for Oklahoma State to make this game somewhat interesting is Oregon's young secondary, where they started, 3 true or redshirt freshmen in the secondary last week, is those guys, have some, issues either staying in front of players or have some kind of alignment errors, and they run free and hit a couple big shots. But truly, aside from that, it feels unlikely Oklahoma State's going to be able to hold up with Oregon. And the other thing I will say is the strength of this team should be the Cowboy defense and their defensive line. And that's going to be an interesting test here going in. They had 4 sacks last game. Wendell Gregory, Matt, who was arrested for shoplifting over last weekend, I think he's going to play.
Yeah, that was like the storyline, and it's just completely flown under the radar since because of Gundy's comments. Maybe, conspiracy theory here. Maybe Gundy did this to just kind of washed away, take away all the attention on this, because you're right. Wendell Gregory, 3 sacks in their week 1 game. He's listed on the depth chart. He's expected to start. Gundy said on Monday that they're aware of his arrest. They're aware he's been bailed. They're gathering facts. They're playing it out. But until they've been notified otherwise, he's going to travel. Now, he didn't say he's trying to play, but he said they're operating as if it's a normal situation right now. And freshman record with 3 sacks in the season opener. He has the most sacks in college football right now. It's granted small sample size. He's a transfer from South Carolina, which is probably a good sign of talent. South Carolina's defensive players are always pretty good.
I just did the recruit ranking thing. He's the third most highest rated recruit on their roster. So he's like a mid 4-star guy.
Yeah. So this is going to be their star, and it's going to be the question of, does he play or does he not play? If he doesn't play, it's going to be. I mean, it's already probably going to be really difficult for them to stay in front of Oregon the whole way through. But if they don't have him, he's their leader, he's their best player. Things could get dicey. On defense too, we should note, like, there is an Oregon connection here. A name that we haven't talked about in a long time. Jalen Davies, transfer from Oregon, went to UCLA for a couple seasons. He's expected to be one of their backup cornerbacks. He's a redshirt senior. He's in his first and only year, unless for the Cowboys. So there's a little bit of connection there. But you're right. Like, this defense is where, if this game is going to be close, if Oklahoma State's going to have an opportunity to win, it's because their defense kind of rises up a little bit and carries an offense that's has a lot of new pieces. Both sides have new pieces, but a new quarterback, a lack of a run game. It's going to have to be the defense that maybe creates a turnover, maybe scores, or a special teams touchdown or something like that for Oklahoma State to stay close in this game.
Yeah, and again, it's so hard to assess. Both these teams played FCS opponents in the first game, and obviously Oregon won by a much, twice the margin essentially in their first game. They beat UT Martin 27-7. They were really successful on that side of the football. We talked about the sacks. They also allowed just like 225 yards of offense in this game. Didn't give an inch in the run game. I think this is the side of the ball they feel best about. And frankly, it's the side of the Oregon team that you probably have, if you do have concerns, it's more offense than defense, at least from my perspective. And so, like, just I don't think there's really much of a chance in hell that Oklahoma State wins this game, just being totally upfront. If this game is going to be, if Oklahoma State's going to, stop Oregon from covering the spread, and this game's going to be kind of interesting, it's probably going to be a lower scoring game. And the path is going to be, they shut down that run offense. They get to Dante Moore a little bit. They are, I think, most susceptible in the secondary than they are in the front seven. I think that's kind of where they feel best right now, based upon kind of talking to McClain and looking at kind of the personnel that they have on the team. But I guess just looking at what Oregon showed in its first game, again, also against an FCS team, I will also say Oregon's FCS opponent was a much better opponent than the one that they played. We'll get a sense of what Oregon actually is too. I think this is going to be, at least at the very least, this is going to be a good measuring stick game of, they're going against better athletes. There's a bunch of guys on here that have played at Power 4 schools, whether it be Oklahoma State or elsewhere. Like when I was doing the top 10 recruits, which you can go check out on Deck Territory, that just went up a little before we started recording. They've got a lot of guys that played at like Florida or Ohio State or Texas or TCU. You mentioned with Henry, who's also one of their top prospect or on the roster. So this is a different level in terms of just like, they have some talent. It's mostly talent that hasn't lived up to the hype at other schools and has had to transfer over to Oklahoma State. But to me, it's just a matter of, like, let's see exactly what Oregon can do against a little bit of a step up athletically, a little bit of a step up maybe in the talent barometer. I fully expect them to pass this with flying colors, but it also wouldn't be surprising, I think, to have maybe a couple of moments where you go, okay, there's kind of the flashes of the youth that didn't show up in the opener. There's kind of the flashes of the lack of experience playing together that didn't show up in the opener. I mean, the opener was so fluid and everything kind of went not really to plan. I wouldn't be surprised if there's some moments that we're talking about in the post-game pod after Oregon. Again, I still feel confident we'll win and win pretty comfortably, that we're going, hey, there's some things to work on. Now Dan has some more things to talk about, because frankly, this has been a weird week coming out. Like, there hasn't been much on the list of like, hey, we really need to hit this home. Like, this wasn't good. I wouldn't be surprised if there are a couple of items coming out of this one that kind of present themselves.
Are we buying the fact that a 20.5 point spread typically kind of suggests that maybe going into the fourth quarter, this game's over? Are we anticipating? We'll get to our score predictions here in a little bit, but I know Oklahoma State only won 3 games last season. They cleaned house. Like 11 of their 14 coaches that are going to be on the field on Saturday are in their first year. Mm-hmm. Another guy is in their second year. So Gundy's like, he flipped the roster over. He basically, like 2/3 of the rosters their first year at Oklahoma State. All the coaches are new. It's like a full program rebuild, except for the guy that's the head coach. And none of these, they've got some good transfers, but a lot of these guys are Group of 5, Division II, FCS. Like, is the talent margin that wide, or do you think this game could theoretically be under the spread? Like, are you going to be at all surprised if Oregon wins this game 38-20? That's an 18-point win. That's a convincing win, but it's not a 28.5-point spread. Like, are you going to all be surprised if Oregon has to keep their starters in the fourth quarter for most of the fourth quarter?
That's a good question, Matt. Yeah, no, I'd be a little bit surprised, I think, based upon I think the injury at quarterback. And one thing we should note is when I was talking to McClain, the Oklahoma State reporter, he did acknowledge like this was a quarterback battle that really came down to the wire of like, in the days leading up to when they announced, like he said, basically in his circle of Oklahoma State reporters, like some guys thought it was Flores, some guys thought it was Haney. They also didn't have open practice, it sounds like, in fall, which as we know makes it hard to kind of assess where things are at. So it really did feel like these guys were on fairly even footing. Both are really young and inexperienced guys. But obviously they liked one better than the other because they named him the starter. I think the fact that you're getting the second quarterback, the fact that their run game didn't really show up on paper, like there's just not very much in that offense that going in, and again, super small sample size, totally different coordinators than last year. All that stuff he talked about kind of makes it hard to really assess. I just have a hard time expecting or buying into Oklahoma State scoring enough in this game to make it interesting late. Now, that doesn't mean, and we'll get to our score predictions at the end, that doesn't mean it's like a for sure cover. And that doesn't mean it's like Oregon wins by 50 points. Like I think you have to give some respect and frankly quite a bit of respect to Oklahoma State and its program and what Mike Gundy has accomplished there. But yeah, I would be a little bit surprised if we go into the fourth quarter and Oregon has to have its starters in. And frankly, like because of how much they substituted last game, like they're probably not even going to have their fourth quarter or the starters in all the time anyway, just because of how much they rotate. But that's a fair point, Matt, and I think something to kind of be aware of. I think if it's a game where it's like a 2 or a 3 score game in the fourth quarter, I think we'll come away probably having some conversations of like, okay, kind of what went wrong, because it'll probably be a little longer list than we expected.
Now is going to be my next question for Oregon. For me, is the rotations. Oregon rotated a ton week 1 against Montana State, and it wasn't even because, hey, the score got out of hand, let's pull our starters off. Like, second possession for Oregon on offense and the second defensive series for Oregon out there with Montana State, they'd started rotating already. Guys were already coming in and out of the game. Does that carry over this week? Do we see any kind of cutback on how frequently or how soon do they rotate? Or does Oregon anticipate, hey, like, no, we're going to treat this like at corner, like Iffy and Brandon Finney, you guys are the starters, but the next defensive possession, we're going to go Naeem Offord and we're going to go Sione, and we're going to see what you guys can do like they did. Or defensive line, Sione Gray I think he came out. Aiden Breland and Bear Alexander were in for that second defensive possession. What kind of rotations do we see? Eric, I kind of think we're going to see a kind of a repeat of what week 1 was, where I don't think Dan's going to be afraid until it is evident, hey, we need to keep the quote starters in, until it becomes evident that they can't deviate away from rotating. I think they're going to do it as long as they possibly can.
That was going to be my answer, Matt. I think I fully anticipate we'll see them open very similar to Montana State. But if this game does end up being a little more competitive, a little more interesting, I wouldn't be surprised if we find out kind of who they really trust. Like who do they really want out there when the game does get more interesting, when the game is on the line, when you have to make those stops, because they frankly just weren't in that position last week, and I think that makes it kind of hard to know exactly who has the staff's trust. Like we know the snap counts, but those were snap counts that are kind of hard to parse through because the game was never competitive, and clearly, they played 70 players in that game, and they played 70 guys, and they had 9 players who didn't play because of injury. I mean, that's essentially, I know we're different now. It used to be you'd have 85 guys on your roster. I know you can have, about 20, 25 more than that now. But that's basically your entire team.
Everybody.
They basically played everybody, really. And if you didn't play, it was probably a sign of like, yeah, these are guys who just are really not ready. So I don't expect to play 70 guys, but I do think they're going to rotate a lot. And I think they're at a position here where they think that they have, like Dana said, above the line players at so many spots and so much depth that I think the rotation is going to be something we see throughout the season. I'm sure it'll get condensed when games like the Penn State game, I bet it's going to be the most condensed we see it. And maybe Indiana and some of those games in November that get a little more interesting. But I'm fully kind of buying into the idea, like on defense, like we might be seeing them play 18 to 25 guys pretty regularly. And on offense, it's probably a little less than that because you keep the starting offensive line out there, I think, as much as possible. But like this might be a team that like is routinely playing 40 to 50 players a game, which is pretty wild to think about. And I frankly think on Saturday we'll see. I'd be shocked if it's less than 50, 55 guys who play. I think there's that many guys who are capable, to be honest.
All right, let's take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll dive into some predictions and ending with a score prediction for Saturday's game. All right, welcome back to the Autzen Audibles podcast. Updating week 1 slate scores here. Eric, you had 3 of your 5 picks go correct. I had 2 of my 5 picks go correct. So I'll let you go first as the person in charge, the person in the lead here. Your team offensive prediction first.
Yeah, one of the things that really stood out in the opener was like Dante was, I think, pressured once and sacked 0 times. I'm not going to say the pressure count's going to be quite as low, but I think they're going to be clean from a sack perspective. And I think that's pretty bold because, like I said earlier, I think the strength of this Oklahoma State team in a lot of ways is its defensive front and its pass rush. They had 4 last game. I know 3 went from 1 player. I think they clean sheet it, and I don't think they give up a sack in this game.
I like it. I would agree with that. I don't anticipate a sack in this game. For me, we're going to 10 guys catch a pass in week 1. That's a wild number. I'm not going to say 10 happens again, but I'm going to go 8. 8 or more guys catch a pass in this game because, like we said earlier, I anticipate Oregon to rotate often. I think we know for pretty comfortably Oregon's top 4 receivers are Gary Bryant Jr., Malik Benson, Decorian Moore, and Jeremiah McClellan. I think those 4 guys all catch a pass. Kenyon Sadiq will also catch a pass. And that just leads now, I just need 3 more guys. And I feel confident that the rotations are going to happen. The play calling will allow it to happen, that we'll see 8 or more guys catch a pass again in this game.
And one thing that helps you there is that, all those guys caught passes last week, and yet only 1 tight end caught a pass, I think. And yeah. I expect Jamari Johnson and Roger Saliapaga to frankly have some kind of pass catching roles in this offense as the season plays out. I think that's totally reasonable. And also the fact that we think the running backs are going to be more incorporated. Like, I
agree.
You could hit this. You could hit this with only 4 receivers catching the ball. You could hit it because you have all these running backs and tight ends. So yeah, I like that. My individual offense, I'm
Yes.
going Dante Moore 300-yard day.
Ooh.
His first 300-yard day as a Duck. I think that's because they will need him to play maybe a little bit further into this game. I don't anticipate, hopefully, fourth quarter he's out there very much. But, the more you look at Oklahoma State, I think you realize that their defensive front is kind of where they feel most confident. It doesn't mean Oregon won't run the ball. I just think they're going to expect to throw the ball a little bit more. And frankly, like the secondary for them is, talking with McLean the other day, is kind of the part of the defense that there's some concerns about. They didn't rear their head against UT Martin. I think the only UT Martin score came on a trick play. I don't think Oregon's going to need a trick play to have success, but kind of like you, I think this is a game where the pass offense is going to be pretty impressive, and I think Dante throws it around a little bit more than he did in the opener.
I have a Dante Moore one as well. I do like your pick. I also think there's going to be some more deep shots in this game because they've got to show a couple things for just to make future opponents start working on other stuff. They're going to show a little bit more, I think, from an offensive standpoint. So that could, because Oregon didn't try once really.
Well, the only time was Austin. Austin came in his second pass attempt was like a 40-yarder to Kyler. That was the only ball downfield.
They had one deep ball. I think there'll be more than that. So I agree with that. I like that pick. I'm also sticking with Dante Moore. I'm going to have him complete more than 70% of his passing attempts for the second straight game. Now, caveat here. 70% under the Dan Lanning era is not I'm not going out on a very far limb here.
That's the bar at this point.
Yes, that's the bar. But I'm going to argue it by saying that was with Bo Nix and that was with Dylan Gabriel, two of the most experienced quarterbacks, or two of the two most experienced quarterbacks in college football. Dante Moore, prior to starting last week at Oregon, as a starting quarterback, 9 games at UCLA, he did it once where he hit 70 or more percent. Now, I think some of that's offense, some of that's growth now with him. So that maybe the stat in 3 or 4 weeks kind of needs to be elevated. But until he kind of shows it, I'm going to go 70% or more. He went 78% against Montana State. I'm anticipating a little drop off because of increasing competition, but 70% or better completion percentage.
I think you're likely to get that one. I think Dante is, and maybe we'll be surprised, but one of the things that really stood out in the opener was just how confident and decisive he was with his decision making. I think don't expect him to break Bo Nix's like 77% completion percentage record he had a couple years ago, but I think he's going to hover in that 67 to 72% range. So I think that's very much on the table. Okay, defensive team. I've got Ducks. This is kind of interesting. Oregon didn't create a single turnover, and yet they won 59 to 17,
that's wild.
Or 13. I think they're going to create multiple, and then I'm making it a little more difficult than myself here. Maybe I'll get half points, but and at least one is by a freshman.
Okay.
Because they have all those in the secondary. I'm kind of thinking whether it's like one of the corners or even some of the safeties, like there's just a lot of guys who should be around the ball in the pass offense. And if we think Oklahoma State's going to be as intentional to push it down the field, why can't Brandon Finney or an Ife Obadegu or an Aaron Flowers or a Kingston Lopa or an Ian Mofford? I mean, the names go on and on. Why can't one of those guys be the one who comes down with it?
I like it. Absolutely. My defensive team prediction, I'm going to go Oregon had 3 sacks against Montana State, with a little bit more opportunity to have opportunities for sacks because Oklahoma State's going to want to throw the football more. And I think if you look at the Cowboys' offensive line, like every single one of them except for one guy, first year start. A lot of experience up front for this Cowboy team. I think they're going to go 4 or more sacks in this game. And that seems like, well, you're only going 1 more than Montana State. Like that seems ludicrous. That seems easy. They only did that, I think, 4 times last season, 4 or more. So that's a big number. 4 sacks is a lot.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm going 4 or more sacks in this game.
Once again, your team prediction ties into my individual. I'm going, and this feels pretty bold, and I think listeners remember, I never hit my defensive individuals. I'm going Mateo, another multiple sack game.
I like it.
So 1.5 or more. I'm going to say if he gets a half or a share of a sack, that counts. I guess in theory, could he get one sack if both are half? We can revisit that if it really gets weird. But I just think he is so dialed in. He looked so good in the opener in a game where Montana State really wasn't a threat to throw the ball. I know one of them came and kind of looked like a botched play where the screen route just didn't open up, and that was a coverage sack more than anything. But he's a dude. We know how good he is, and I think in a game like this where the competition steps up, I think he steps up too.
My individual is a tie-in to your team. Maybe I'm cheating here because I picked two guys, but I'm saying Brandon Finney or Ife Obadegwu gets their first career interception. I kind of figured maybe bend the rules. If we're not trying to break rules, but what's the point of having rules? Is that against the rules? Or should
I'm going to allow it because if that happens, I hit mine. So okay. Why not? Shoot, I give you Neem offered if you want to just go all three corners that are freshmen.
No, I think that's cheating. Because
you're going to regret that on Saturday when Neem offered gets the interception. You're going to go, I wish I would have taken Erik up on that.
Or Kingston Lopa, his guys at safety. But yeah, I think with the two freshmen, Brandon Finney and Ife Obadegwu starting, knowing that Oklahoma State wants to take some shots, there's going to be opportunities here. I think, and as they should, Oklahoma State should test these guys because they weren't tested really at all against Montana State. See what they can do early on. See if you can take a shot at them and complete a pass. But I think those opportunities are going to lead to one of these two guys creating a turnover for their defense.
We're getting into the team score here, the game prediction.
Yeah, go for it. Yep.
So I'm going to just repeat last week's pick of 38-10. It feels about the right margin. It feels about the right offensive.
You don't have them covering.
Because I guess I don't. I just don't. Well, that gives me pause because I kind of. Well, we'll stick with it. I've already said it.
All right.
So. I guess I'm not taking the cover, which I thought. I guess. Yeah. Because it's 28.5. Okay. Yeah. Bad job, Erik. I just thought what I picked last week feels appropriate for this week. I think Oregon's going to have some success offensively, obviously, and I think I just am concerned Oklahoma State's offense is going to have enough potency to move the ball and have sustained success. Maybe they hit a couple of long shots that set up their scoring drives, and maybe we're surprised, and maybe Oklahoma State's offense is a little bit more explosive. But I think this Oregon defense is top notch. I think there's a case to be made. They're going to prove to be almost better than they were a year ago. I know there's a lot of youth on this team, but more talented, maybe the right way to put it. Maybe they won't be as productive, but 38-10 feels about right. And especially when you go, like you said earlier, without Hedgie in the offense last week against UT Martin, Oklahoma State really struggled against an FCS team to move the ball and to score points. I would be surprised. I think you'd be disappointed if they got more than 20 points in this game. I think that would be classified as, okay, maybe some things to go back to the drawing board. You could make a case, I guess, as we know with Oregon over the last couple of years, how many times have we missed on our picks because the other team has a backdoor, cover over a couple touchdowns late. Maybe we see that happen again, and maybe it's a game where Oregon's in control throughout, and the younger players give up some points late. But I like 38-10.
I saw that spread in 28.5 and told myself, is Oklahoma State really worse or on paper almost equal to Montana State? Because the Bobcats were a 27.5 point favorite, and that line really never moved one way or the other. Or
underdog, yeah. Be careful.
And Oregon has remained a 28.5 point favorite all week. It's not moved once. I don't know. I just have a hard time believing that Montana State is equal to Oklahoma State. But you factor in backup quarterback, question marks along the offensive line, a poor run game. Maybe that is the case. We'll see. But regardless, I think Oregon's talent here is going to be just insurmountable. Oklahoma State, maybe they'll have better depth on paper, I would think, than Montana State to maybe prolong a game to the usual wear and tear maybe doesn't catch up as quickly as it would for maybe Montana State. But regardless, I still think Oregon's going to win this game. I think Oregon's going to win this game convincingly. I like the offense and the defense to both be kind of humming at high cylinders. The offense to be very balanced. Like, it would not surprise me if both the run game and the pass game goes over 225. And you really don't know what is coming at you if you're Oklahoma State because it's so equal. Defensively, I do think we'll see some turnovers. I think that's going to kind of create some margin of victory here. But I think ultimately in the end, the score won't be as high for Oregon as it was last week. They'll have to maybe keep their top 22, I guess is what we'll call it.
I guess, yeah.
In the game a little bit longer than normal. But I'm still walking away with a pretty impressive win. I think fans are going to be, and I think more so the media outside of Eugene are going to be talking about this team more Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, just because of the name that they beat and the score being kind of similar. So I'm going Oregon 48, Oklahoma 17. I don't think they score as many points as they did last week. I think they give up a little bit more than they gave up last week. But in the end, they still cover the spread. The fourth quarter, it's still kind of just a running clock, get the game out and get out of here. And Oregon moves to 2-0 on the season.
Here's an additional bonus question. Does Oregon have its first punt of the season? That, by the way, would have been a fun prediction to make.
Yeah, over under half a punt.
I think they're gonna punt, and I think we're gonna see James Reynolds Ferguson out there first. Or James Ferguson, whatever I'm so unfamiliar with the punters at this point because he's a new guy and he's got a hyphenated name. If whichever one it is, yeah, I think we're gonna see the Boise State punter.
James Ferguson Reynolds, number 46 in your programs, number 1 in Erik Skopil's heart.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I knew his name so confidently. So good about it. But by the way, top mullet on the roster, best hair, I think, for him.
Best hair. I'm going to go under. I don't think we see a punt, but that's not because there isn't an opportunity to punt. I think they go for it on fourth down in kind of like a midfield, just maybe cross midfield scenario, or instead of taking a 5-yard penalty to push them back to punt, maybe they try a long field goal. I think there's probably a more likely scenario that we see an Attica Sappington kick for 48 plus than a punt.
And if that's the case, I would be curious to see. We'll have to start doing research afterwards. How many games a team has gone? What's like the record for most games to start a season without a punt? Because I can't imagine it's more than like 3 or 4.
Right.
I can't, And hey, I did have one thing. I saw somebody post this in our direct messages a couple of days ago in a follow-up to our comments or our conversation on the Monday mailbag on Monday about the last time 2 freshmen started at corner. Jarris Burt and Walter Thurman did finish the season starting in 2006 together. So there's your answer. So it's been about 20 years.
I'm pretty sure
you brought it up. You brought it up. I looked it up. Jackie Bates had started the season, and I just didn't go further into the game log. And then this guy popped in and said, hey, I think Jackie got hurt like a few games in, and Jarris replaced him. So there you go.
Both those guys went on to have very successful careers at Oregon and became high draft picks at the NFL level. Maybe certainly a path for those 2 freshmen that Oregon starting this season to maybe potentially follow.
Yeah. Okay. No doubt.
All right, it's going to do it for us here on the show. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. We're back on YouTube. Hopefully we'll get these up consistently now that Erik is feeling a little bit better. Next time you hear from us will be Saturday evening. We'll be breaking down Oregon, Oklahoma State recap. Erik and I will both be at Autzen Stadium, so we'll have firsthand context for you for that one. But until then, you've been listening to the Autzen Audibles podcast.
Talk to you later, folks.